Whispers of the Forgotten. Captain Zix had been a merchant for 37 standard years, hauling cargo across the Outer Rim territories, where few species dared to venture. His ship, the Wandering Star, creaked and groaned as it docked with the ancient orbital station floating in the darkness of the Kepler void. The station had been abandoned for centuries, but salvage rights were cheap in forgotten space, and Zix needed every credit he could scrape together. Walking through the dusty corridors of the station, Zix's 4 arms carefully moved to breathe, while his scanner searched for anything valuable. Most of the station was empty, stripped clean by previous salvagers, but deep in the lower levels, he found something that made his breathing stop. Behind a sealed door marked with strange symbols, he discovered a room filled with artifacts unlike anything he had ever seen. The objects were clearly technological, but their design was alien to him. Smooth curves mixed with sharp angles, materials that seemed to shift color in the light, and symbols that hurt his eyes to look at directly. But what truly shocked him was the writing on some of the objects. It was in basic galactic standard, but the style was ancient, dating back over 500 years. One device still functioned when he activated it. A holographic display showed star charts of the galaxy, but they were wrong. Worlds that should have been marked as inhabited showed as empty space, while dead systems glowed with signs of life. At the center of it all was a small blue planet labeled with a single word that made his heart race: Earth. Zix had heard the stories, like every spacer who spent time in the dark between stars. Legends spoke of a race called humans who had once sailed the void, but they were just stories. Everyone knew humans were myths, tales invented by lonely traders to pass the time during long journeys. Yet here was evidence that they had been real, and more than that, they had been here, in this very station. He gathered everything he could carry and rushed back to his ship. The journey to the nearest Federation outpost took 6 days, but Zix barely slept. His mind raced with questions and possibilities. If humans had been real, what had happened to them? Why had they vanished? And why were their artifacts hidden in an abandoned station in the middle of nowhere? At the outpost, Zix tried to sell his findings, but no one believed him. The artifacts were dismissed as elaborate fakes or the work of some unknown artist. But word of his discovery spread, and soon it reached the ears of Counselor Thane, one of the oldest members of the Galactic Federation Council. Thane was ancient even by his species standards, old enough to remember when the Federation was still young and expanding. He had always been fascinated by history, particularly the gaps in the records that seemed to suggest missing pieces of the galactic story. When he heard about Zix's discovery, he immediately ordered the artifacts brought to the council chambers for study. The examination revealed something that shook the very foundations of the Federation. The artifacts were genuine, dating back over 5 centuries. More disturbing was what the council's historians found when they dug deeper into the restricted archives. References to humans appeared in dozens of classified documents, but always with large sections redacted or completely missing. What they could piece together painted a troubling picture. Humans had once been members of the Federation, but something had gone wrong. There were mentions of a great betrayal, of humans being cast out or worse. The records were too fragmentary to reveal the whole truth, but one thing was clear. The Federation had worked very hard to erase all trace of humanity from official history. Thane brought his findings to the council, but his colleagues were skeptical. Councillor Vrack, speaking for the military faction, argued that even if humans had existed, they were clearly extinct now. There had been no sign of them for 500 years. The matter should be classified and forgotten, he said, to avoid causing unnecessary panic among the member worlds. But events were already moving beyond the Council's control. 3 days after Thane's presentation, long-range sensors detected unusual activity in the frontier zones. Ships were reporting strange signals, transmissions that didn't match any known species' communication patterns. The signals were faint but consistent, appearing near old trade routes that hadn't been used in centuries. Commander Yelax of the Federation patrol vessel Bright Lance was investigating one such signal when her ship's sensors detected something that should have been impossible. A massive vessel, larger than any ship in the Federation fleet, had appeared at the edge of the system. It made no attempt to communicate or identify itself. It simply waited, like a predator watching its prey. Yelax ordered her crew to maintain distance while she tried to establish contact. Her communications officer sent standard greeting protocols in 17 different languages, but received no response. Passive scans revealed nothing about the ship's construction or capabilities. It was as if the vessel absorbed all sensor energy directed at it, giving back only silence. For 6 hours, the two ships faced each other across the void. Yelax's crew grew increasingly nervous as time passed. The alien vessel's very presence seemed to press against their minds, filling them with a sense of being watched and judged. Finally, just as Yelax was about to order a retreat, the unknown ship transmitted a single message. The signal bypassed all of the Bright Lance's communication filters and security protocols. It didn't come through the speakers or display screens. Instead, it seemed to speak directly into the minds of everyone on board, in their own languages, with perfect clarity and terrible certainty. "We remember what you did." The message was followed by complete silence. Sensors showed the alien vessel beginning to move, not away from the system, but deeper into Federation space. Yelax tried to pursue, but her ship's engines suddenly failed. Not damaged or destroyed, simply turned off as if someone had flipped a switch. By the time her engineering team restored power, the massive vessel had vanished. Yelax's report reached the Council within hours, but it was not the only one. Similar encounters were being reported across the Federation. Mysterious ships appearing near worlds that had strategic importance, always alone, always silent until they delivered the same chilling message. The pattern was clear to anyone who cared to look. These vessels were visiting specific locations, places that had significance in the Federation's hidden history. Panic began. The first phase of the human return was complete. They had announced their presence, demonstrated their capabilities, and reminded the galaxy of old debts. But this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the rim, a vast fleet was moving, carrying the descendants of Earth toward a reckoning that had been centuries in the making. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, but humanity had never forgotten the galaxy. And they were no longer the species that had been cast out so long ago. They had grown strong in exile, tempered by hardship, and united by purpose. They were coming back not as supplicants or refugees, but as conquerors. The age of human myths and legends was over. The age of human reality had begun. The return of Earth's children. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the massive view screen. Around her, the largest human fleet ever assembled moved through the void like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. 250 ships, each one a masterpiece of engineering and warfare, carrying the hopes and anger of an entire species. 500 years had passed since the Great Betrayal, when the Galactic Federation had turned against humanity and cast them out of civilized space. 500 years of exile, of building new homes in the darkness between stars, of growing strong while the galaxy forgot they had ever existed. But humans had not forgotten. They never forgot. "Admiral," reported Commander Martinez from the navigation station, "we're approaching the edge of Federation space. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple fleet movements. They know we're coming." Chen nodded calmly, her gray eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Federation had mobilized everything they had, pulling ships from across their territory to meet the human threat. It was an impressive show of force. Nearly 1,000 vessels arranged in defensive formations around their core worlds. But they were fighting the last war, using tactics and technology that had been obsolete for centuries. "Signal the fleet," Chen ordered. "All ships to battle stations. We drop out of hyperspace in 30 minutes. The humans had used their time in exile well, while the Federation had grown complacent and corrupt, spreading their resources thin across 1,000 worlds. Humanity had focused on survival and improvement. They had pushed the boundaries of science and engineering, driven by the knowledge that they might one day return to reclaim their place among the stars. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's chief diplomat, approached Chen's command chair. She was younger than the admiral, but her eyes held the same quiet intensity that marked all the children of exile. The Federation Council has agreed to meet with us. They want to negotiate. After 500 years, now they want to talk, Chen said with a bitter smile. How generous of them. The truth was that Chen had expected this. The Federation had built their power on politics and compromise, always seeking the path of least resistance. They would try to negotiate because they feared what would happen if they fought. But some things could not be settled with words alone. We'll meet with them, Chen decided. But they need to understand that this is not a request. We're not asking permission to return. We're informing them that we're home. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, the ancient home of humanity. The sight that greeted them was both familiar and strange. The sun still burned with the same golden light, but the planets had changed. Mars had been terraformed, its red surface now mottled with blue and green. Jupiter's moons bristled with mining stations and habitats. But Earth itself remained untouched, a blue jewel floating in the void, preserved as a monument to human extinction. The Federation fleet was waiting for them, arranged in a massive defensive wall between the humans and the inner planets. At its center was the FSS Harmony, the flagship of the Federation's combined forces. General Korath, the Federation's supreme military commander, had come to personally oversee the confrontation. Unknown vessels, came the transmission from the Federation fleet. You are entering restricted space. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. Chen smiled as she opened a channel to the entire Federation fleet. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 5 centuries of exile and the quiet confidence of a species that had survived the impossible. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Federation. We are the children of Earth, returning home after 500 years of exile. We come to reclaim what was stolen from us and to settle accounts with those who betrayed us. The response was immediate and predictable. Korath's voice, tight with anger and fear, echoed across the void. Humans were declared extinct centuries ago. I don't know who you are or where you came from, but you have no claim to this system. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Extinct, Chen repeated, her voice carrying a note of dark amusement. Is that what you told yourselves? That we simply disappeared? That the greatest betrayal in galactic history was just an unfortunate accident? She gestured to her communications officer, who began transmitting data to the Federation fleet. Historical records, eyewitness accounts, and classified documents that the Federation had thought were destroyed forever. The truth of what had happened 500 years ago, preserved in human memory and passed down through generations of exile. The Federation had feared humanity's rapid expansion and technological advancement. They had seen humans as a threat to their established order, a species that refused to accept limitations or boundaries. So they had acted, using politics and manipulation to isolate humanity, then military force to drive them from civilized space. They had destroyed human colonies, scattered human fleets, and claimed that it was all for the greater good of galactic peace. But they had not been thorough enough. Some humans had escaped, fleeing to the dark spaces between stars where no one would follow. They had built new homes in the void, raised their children in exile, and never stopped planning for their return. You cast us out because you feared what we might become, Chen continued. You were right to fear us. We are everything you were afraid we would be, and more. The demonstration began without warning. The human fleet moved with precision that seemed impossible, ships dancing through space in perfect formation while their weapon systems came online. But they did not fire. Instead, they simply existed, their presence a promise of what would happen if the Federation chose to fight. The Federation's sensors recorded impossible readings. Human ships that moved without visible engines, weapons that bent space itself, shields that seemed to absorb rather than deflect incoming energy. The technology gap was so vast that it might as well have been magic. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward as Chen's transmission continued. "We did not come here for war, though we are prepared for it. We came to offer you a choice. Accept us back into galactic society as equals, or step aside and let us reclaim our place by force." General Korath's response was swift and predictable. "I will not negotiate with terrorists and criminals. You have 10 minutes to withdraw before we open fire." Chen sighed and looked at her tactical officer. "Show them what we learned in the dark." A single human ship, a small destroyer, broke formation and approached the Federation line. The Federation fleet opened fire immediately, launching everything they had at the lone vessel. Thousands of missiles and energy beams converged on the human ship, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The weapons passed through the human vessel as if it were not there. The ship continued its approach, untouched and unharmed, while the Federation fleet stared in disbelief. When it reached the Federation flagship, it simply stopped, hovering next to the massive vessel like a predator examining its prey. "Phase technology," Chen explained calmly. "We exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Your weapons cannot touch us unless we allow it. We developed this after the third time you tried to genocide us." The Federation fleet was in chaos now, commanders shouting orders and demanding explanations. Some ships were trying to retreat while others prepared for a fight they could not win. But Chen was not done demonstrating human capabilities. "Computer, disable their weapon systems," she ordered. Across the Federation fleet, weapons went offline. Not damaged or destroyed, simply turned off as if someone had flipped a switch. Engine systems remained functional, life support continued to work, but every offensive capability was neutralized in seconds. "We've been watching you for 500 years, Chen said. "We know your technology better than you do. We know your weaknesses, your fears, your secrets. We know about the corruption in your government, the rebellions you've suppressed, the species you've conquered and claimed to liberate." Dr. Vasquez took over the transmission, her voice softer but no less determined. "We're not here to destroy you. We're here to offer partnership. Humanity has learned much in exile. We can share our knowledge, help you solve problems you didn't even know you had. But we will not be cast out again. We will not be forgotten." The silence that followed was broken by a new voice, one that carried the weight of age and wisdom. Councillor Thane had taken control of the Federation communications from his position on the council station. "I remember the old stories," he said quietly. "I remember what we did to you. I remember the fear that drove us to such desperate measures. We were wrong. We were afraid of your potential, your refusal to accept limitations. We thought we were protecting the galaxy, but we were only protecting our own power." Chen's expression softened slightly. Finally, someone was speaking the truth. "Fear is understandable, Counselor, but fear does not excuse betrayal. Fear does not justify genocide." "No," Thane agreed. "It does not. The question now is what comes next. You have returned, and you have shown us that you are far beyond anything we can match. You could destroy us if you chose. Why haven't you?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the Federation fleet that was now completely at her mercy. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 5 centuries of pain and the hope of the species that had never given up. "Because we remember what we were before the betrayal. We were explorers, scientists, builders. We wanted to be part of something greater than ourselves. That desire never died, even in exile. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to help it reach its potential." The negotiations that followed were tense and difficult. The Federation was forced to acknowledge the crimes of the past and agree to reparations for the human species. Humanity would be granted full membership in the galactic community, with territory and representation befitting their capabilities. Old wounds would be acknowledged, though not easily healed. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy would learn from humanity's example. They would see what a species could become when driven by necessity and united by purpose. They would understand that exile and betrayal could create something far more dangerous than any conqueror, a people who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. As the human fleet took up positions throughout the Sol system, Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, looking down at the blue marble that had been humanity's first home. Her people were no longer the naive explorers who had been cast out 500 years ago. They were something new, something forged in the darkness between stars. They were the children of Earth, and they had finally come home. The galaxy would never be the same.